Hey, good morning to our webinar. This is the Manure Management Utilization Technologies, fifth of a series. Today we're working with anaerobic digestion topics. It's part two. We had the last one last month. And we welcome back anyone who's been in the series before, and as well as the new people we have that may have not heard about this before our sessions today. First, kind of a background before this group. This is an effort between several groups with Purdue University to work with some of the manure utilization around the state as well as throughout the Midwest. This is a joint effort between the Purdue Ag and Biological Engineering Department, the Purdue Animal Science Department, as well as county extension offices around Indiana. So for today, we'd also like to remind those people that are coming on for potential certified crop advisor credits. We will be offering those at the end of each presentation. Each presentation is about 45 minutes in length, including question and answer. So we're going to have about a half credit for each of the sessions today. So we'll have one nutrient management and one crop management credit available for those attending all sessions. And again, we'll have those QR codes come up at the end of the presentation, as well as at the very end of the webinar for anybody that might have not had a chance to get their phone up in time to capture that. Let's just move on to our first presenter today. Our first speaker will be Dr. Juliana Vasco-Correa. She is an assistant professor for agricultural and biological engineering with Penn State University. For today's webinar, she'll be assisting us with the economics of agricultural anaerobic digestion.
Good morning, everyone, and apologies for my voice. I have been quite sick lately. I was hoping to be feeling better for today, but actually seems to getting worse. Good thing now that we are online, I can still be here, but we'll see if I'm able to stay for the rest, to hear the rest of the speakers, which sound very interesting. Today I'm going to talk a little about economics of anaerobic digestion. I work on this area for a while, and I'm here mostly to share some generalities about the economics of this area and to share also some resources. So I know that this is the second part of this webinar series, and a lot of you were present before and know about anaerobic digestion, but some of you might not. So I wanted to give a little bit of a refresher at the beginning of anaerobic digestion and what it is and why we're all here. And so anaerobic digestion is this process that is called anaerobic because it's with absence of oxygen. So hopefully we're in a some sort of contained environment where there's no oxygen present or very, very little oxygen. And certain type of microorganisms can act at that those conditions to degrade organic matter. And that organic matter could be manure, but it could also be some other source of organic matter, food waste, some other sources of agricultural waste, sewage sludge are the most common resources. But anaerobic digestion has been researched, for example, also for actual crops, silage, or actual energy crops, hay, things like that. So actually any organic matter could be added to these digestates. And a group of microbes are able to first degrade these materials, this organic matter, into smaller molecules and then convert it into what we call biogas. So biogas is a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide. Methane is the main thing that we care about in the biogas. And methane concentration in biogas could be anywhere from 50% to 75%. And And that is where the energy comes from, the renewable energy. So that's what we care the most about. So this biogas can have many different sources. It can be burned directly in some sort of boiler in the farm or in the facility. And that could be used for heat. It could be burned in a combined heat and power unit. And then that way you have the heat, but you also will have electricity. Or it could be used as renewable natural gas. The methane in the biogas is identical to the methane in renewable natural, in natural gas, in regular natural gas, in fossil-based natural. The only problem here is the presence of carbon dioxide and, sometimes some other types of contaminants like hydrogen sulfide. But if we're able to clean up this biogas and get rid of most of that carbon dioxide and sometimes, as I said, some of those other contaminants, we're able to obtain compressed natural gas. Or natural gas that could be compressed, like the fossil fuel natural gas is compressed for fuel, or that it could be injected into a gas grid or used as renewable natural gas in the facility if that's needed for any type of operation inside the facility. Besides that, of course, not everything, not all the organic matter becomes gas. So some stays in the digester, and that's what we call the digestate. So the digestate is all the rest of the material that is there, and that usually has a high moisture content. So it's usually separated in a liquid effluent and a solid effluent. And the uses are vary, but the most common things that are happening right now in the US to digest it is actually many times it's just sent to a landfill, which is of course not ideal. And many people don't like to mention that as an alternative, but the reality is a high percentage of the digestate right now in the US is being sent to landfills. And it could be incinerated, which but it also could be land applied. So land application is usually called as the main use for digestate, and it is very interesting. And the liquid digestate could be sprayed for nutrients. The solid digestate can also be sprayed. Instead of applying the undigested manure, it has a lot of advantages. But the reality is that it is an expensive operation that requires a significant amount of land, that requires storage. And because of that, sometimes it cannot happen, and sometimes it cannot generate the revenue that it is expected. Digestate is many times called claimed as a fertilizer, and it has a lot of those properties because it has a lot of the nutrients. So depending on the initial nutrients of the organic matter, those nutrients will be preserved through anaerobic digestion. So the nitrogen, the phosphorus will still be there. It doesn't go into the biogas. But the use, it might be a little difficult for many reasons. One of the main reasons, the digestate has a lot of water, and so transportation can be difficult. So if it's the water, that's solved, but not all the times it's the water. And even if it's the water, the solid digestate is still ends up containing a significant amount of water. So this is anaerobic digestion at a glance. So anaerobic digestion can be performed in many forms, in many ways. It's not a new technology at all. There's reports of anaerobic digestion being used for technologically for at least a century, and not technologically for millennia. So right now, And there's many ways of classifying anaerobic digestion. Anaerobic digestion can be classified as depending on the temperature, the digesters work, depending on the reactors. But since this is not a talk about the technology that much, I'm not gonna go into that. But one specific classification that I like, that I think is important from the economics, is that depending on where the digesters are put. So many times the digesters are classified as standalone digesters. These are digesters that are independent, that are usually industrially driven. The main source of standalone digesters, the main source of feedstock of standalone digesters in the US is food waste, but they usually need more than one feedstock. Then we have on-farm digesters. These are the most typical ones that we talked about, the ones that require the manure of the farm, but sometimes other agricultural waste. And then we have the wastewater treatment plant digesters. These are the ones that process sewage sludge. Sometimes the EPA likes to call these water reclamation facilities or water resource reclamation facilities, something like that, instead of wastewater treatment plants because of that. So the idea is to get energy and nutrients and other products from the waste of the wastewater treatment plants. So here is a system of an anaerobic digester in a farm. So in a farm, we have different inputs. We do have the manure, but we also have other resources. So we might have different organic waste in the farm, depending on any processing that is performed around, or waste from other sources that could be acquired and that can come for the anaerobic digestion. So the digester produces biogas, as we mentioned. So we will have to first clean up to remove, sometimes there might be some water, and as I said, hydrogen sulfide. And then this generates what we call medium BTU biogas. So biogas that it has an energy content, of course, but because it still has some of the CO2, is not completely, is not exactly renewable natural gas yet. And so these biogas could be used in boilers for heaters, chillers, things like that. And directly, this recapture here could be used on the farm or in some neighbor buildings for heating buildings, greenhouses, food storage, adjacent commercial or any industrial needs. Some of this heat is usually used to keep the temperature of the anaerobic digestion. Anaerobic digestion is way more efficient when the temperature is stable. So keeping the temperature at the same level significantly improves the biogas output. So this is very common. Also, anaerobic digestion could be more efficient sometimes if it's kept at higher temperatures. So sometimes that's what they call thermophilic anaerobic digestion. So sometimes that would require more of this heat that is produced. Instead of that, the biogas could be further processed. Could be used like that, excuse me, in as I mentioned, a combined heat and power unit, some sort of internal combustion engine, when it generates heat, but it also generates electricity. So this electricity could replace the electricity usage in the farm, but any excess could be sold to the utility. Instead of that, we could just remove the CO2. This process, it could be expensive, but it could be worth it because, of course, the product will have more added value because this is where you actually get to biomethane or renewable natural gas. So this biogas, this biomethane, could be compressed and sold as compressed natural gas for vehicle transportation or it could be injected into the gas grid. It could be used like that. So if there's any particular equipment that is using natural gas in the farm, then it can just be used directly in that without having to take gas from the grid. Of course, from the economic perspective, and when decided on a project of anaerobic digestion, it's very important to know the regulations of the area for these operations. For example, for injecting renewable natural gas into the grid, this requires certain temperatures and certain pressures that are regulated. The grid needs to be, of course, relatively close to be able to get it there. If not, it needs to be trucked into a place of injection. So these all needs to be taken into account when analyzing the economics of a new project of anaerobic digestion. Besides that, as I mentioned, we have the digestate, and the digestate usually goes to a solid separator, and you end up with a liquid and a solid product. The liquid usually goes into lagoons for storage, and these lagoons tend to generate sometimes emissions and runoff sometimes, so they're not great. And sometimes they generate odors, so communities sometimes don't like them too much. But it needs to be stored because it can only be used at certain times as a fertilizer for field or for greenhouse crops or as flush water. So it has a lot of value in that way. From the nutrients perspective, from the nutrients replacement perspective. However, the reality is getting actual monies, getting actual cash for this is very hard. And most anaerobic digesters give these for, if they cannot use it all in the farm, they give it for free. Mostly the biggest cost in this transaction will actually be the transportation. So the best hope that you have that someone comes and pumps it out of your lagoon and takes it away without charging you. That's kind of your best hope. But you have to give it away for free for that to be able to happen because they are paying for the transportation. With the solids could also be sold as a fertilizer product, but that is usually processed. Sometimes after that they're composted to be stabilized, and they could be packed. And they could be used for bedding, for animal bedding in the same farm, or sold as a product. So a revenue from the solids is more likely, but it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes, as I said, this product is just sent to landfills, incinerated, or given away for free as a fertilizer, again, hoping that someone just pays for the transportation. So establishing a market of some sort for these solids is key to make these anaerobic digestion projects more economically feasible and more sustainable long term. Great products can be actually made from it. So there's a company right now that takes this material and makes this pot things that are, those pot things where you buy small plants to plant, the ones that are biodegradable, that are usually made of some sort of a fiber paper type. So they make them sometimes with anaerobic digestate. So these high value products, fiber-based products that are biodegradable and that stay in the agricultural sector, will have a significant value, a significant environmental advantage as well, generate more circularity, but also be able to generate that additional stream of revenue. But as I said, it's not the most common practice to get revenue from these sources. So it's very important to establish them at the beginning and to work on generating markets for it from the initial project to ensure that the estimations on the economics of the project are realistic and are sustainable. So anaerobic digestion is important because it has a lot of benefits as well as challenges. And as you can see, I talk a lot about the challenges, but the most important part is that it generates new revenues for from these systems that can significantly diversify farm income. So these new sources of income could be selling the biogas based by renewable energy. So that renewable energy could be sold in many forms, as I said, electricity or as renewable natural gas, and the recipient of tipping fees for co-digestion feedstocks. So and we will hear more about co-digestion later today, which I'm super excited to hear about. But if we are able to digest more than manure, we're able to take organic waste from some other sources, those sources will be paying a tipping fee. Instead of paying a tipping fee to the landfill where they will be disposing that organic waste, they will be paying it to the digester. So because of that, that could be an additional source of revenue. And then any digested derived products. Of course, here in there's one that I might be missing. Yes, that is anything related with tax credits. And I have some more on the revenues later, but I know we also have a talk today about that. So I decided to take some of my tax credit and carbon credit information out and actually hear it from the expert today. So the system, the anaerobic digestion system has many components, which are key to later understanding why they're so expensive. So anaerobic digestion, the most expensive, from the economic perspective, from the financial perspective, we need to analyze both the capital investment and the operation expenses. Anaerobic digestion is expensive in capital investment. These capital expenses are high for these projects. They could easily go into the millions of dollars. So they are a big investment that needs to be thought well. Of course, right now they are developments, and we will hear some more about that too, and small digesters that could be inexpensive. But in general, most of the projects that we have right now are in the range of millions of dollars. And because of that, it's very important that the economics are very well thought out. But why are they so expensive? Because they have several components. They need on-site organic waste collection system that connects the manure and other organic matter and transport this to the digester facility. Then a pre-treatment area where that the material is processed, size reduced, mixed, stabilized before it's able to be pumped into the anaerobic digester. This needs significant storage sometimes, because sometimes the collection systems don't work at the same pace that the anaerobic digestion, and the anaerobic digestion is very sensitive to the feeding. So it needs to be fed at certain rates that might not be the collection rates at certain points. Of course, then we have the biogas handling system. So biogas is actually, in my opinion, the easiest part of handling in the anaerobic digestion plant. The biogas is usually collected in the steam reactor, and that's why you see those reactors have those shapes, because the biogas is actually collected inside the steam reactor, and it could be stored there for a while. However, if there's no way of using the anaerobic digestion, the biogas relatively fast, the plant might need additional storage units for the biogas. Now, the biogas processing, it is not that simple. And it depends on the actual final use of the biogas. So if the biogas, we talked about it, if the biogas is going to be used as renewable natural gas, it needs to be cleaned up and remove the CO2. Those processes could be expensive, and then it can be sent for its use. So if it's going to be used for electricity or heat, it might need a combined heat and power unit, which are also not inexpensive. And finally, we have the digestion handling system that usually requires the separation of the solids and the liquids, and then processing the solid and the liquid co-products. That includes the lagoon and everything to manage these both solid and liquid co-products. So as I was saying, the economics of an AD project, like the economics of any project, need to consider the capital cost, the operating cost, any other sort of cost, and of course the revenues, and do the balance to see how the cash flows are going to work. So the capital cost are usually significant, and because of that, these projects need to be really well thought out. I'll talk a little more about it. The operating costs are not negligible, though, and my belief is that a lot of times some of these operating costs have been underestimated, and that is one of the reasons that the plant sometimes fail. The revenues come from different sources, of course, from the potential sale of the renewable energy, but also from any digested sales and from subsidies, taxes, grants, and other income. So the capital investment could include any of these things listed here, among others: land acquisition, site development, the civil works, the actual structure, the buildings, the tanks, all the equipment, the mixer, the pumps, the generators, the equipment installation, the conveyance system of the material, the processing material, then getting all the material into the digestate, and moving things between tanks, between storage tanks, the controls, the permitting fees, the project management, consulting and legal, the contractor overhead and profit, and the developer cost for process design and engineering services. So these costs, as I mentioned, could go well up into the millions. Other costs that are that should be lumped into the capital costs are the working capital and the contingencies. The working capital is that capital needed before the plant is able to start generating revenue that could be used for the cash flows to maintain the cash flow of the project when it's initiating. There's going to be a significant working capital required. Besides that, there's always a contingency needed in any of these type of projects. That really depends on how much pre-work, how much feasibility assessment it has been done. While the project development increases, the actual contingency estimation decreases. So the contingency will be smaller, and it could get down to about plus minus 10% by the end. But when the project, the first feasibility analysis start, the pre-feasibility analysis start, it could go up to all the way to 50% because of there's so much uncertainty on the actual estimations of the feasibility of an anaerobic digestion project. This capital cost could usually come, I'll say, two ways. You could have like a turnkey anaerobic digestion plant. You hire someone, you buy a technology that has been developed, that has been proven, and they come and they install that reactor in the rest of the plant, and they basically give you the key and say, turn it on, it's ready. And so that comes as a package. And that, of course, is going to need some of this extra cost. You will still need the engineering and the site development and other things, the land acquisition. So some other costs besides the turnkey cost. But and that is common in other areas of the world. It's very common in certain countries in Europe. It's not that common in the US. In the US, most projects, in the reality is, a lot of people in anaerobic digestion will tell you most projects are still designed one by one. They're designed specifically for the needs and for the conditions. Farms are also unique, and the other potential sources of organic matter and locations and everything makes projects so unique that the most common practice is to actually build every digester as a unique project with complete design from scratch from a contractor. So besides the capital expenses, an anaerobic digestion plant will have operating expenses that needs to be taken into account. Very important one is the operating labor. A lot of the times, I think this is one of the ones that has been underestimated, because sometimes it is just believed that the farm workers will be able to just do the work of the anaerobic digestion plant, just go feed the digester once a day, and then that's it. And that is not true. Most anaerobic digestion plants will likely need a full-time operator. They have a lot of controls. They have a lot of recording of what's happening at different places. They can get pumps can get clogged. So it needs a lot of unscheduled maintenance, and of course scheduled maintenance. And it is believed that this is one of the main reasons anaerobic digestion plants in the past have not survived, and is underestimating the maintenance and the work and the qualified labor and the trained labor that is required to run these plants. Besides that, if there's any other needed purchase utilities, again, that depends on if what are the sources of water for the particular location, but also if the biogas is being used for energy inside the plant or not, and the mechanical maintenance systems, chemicals and consumables. The digestate disposal could be expensive. As I said, digested, if used well, could be a source of revenue, but most of the times it can become a cost. Actually getting rid of it could become very expensive. Imagine if most of the people right now are like about 40 or 50% of anaerobic digestion plants at some point sent digested to landfills. That's gonna cost a lot of money. If not, sometimes just the transportation, even if you're giving some of these products for free, just the handling and everything didn't cost you zero, so you might be losing money there. Or you might even have to chip in on the transportation, because people might not be able to take it for free just because they have to pay to transport it far away. And transporting, especially when it's water, is not very efficient. Regulatory compliance, insurance, miscellaneous, and property taxes. Property taxes, it really depends most of the time. If the digester is on farm, is considered part of the farm, so it really doesn't have that the additional cost, but it might have it if it has deep packers or some other source of equipment that might consider that is processing external organic waste. So sometimes you might be taking organic waste that comes with packages. So that usually requires the installation of a depackager, so a machine that takes away the packages, and then you have to dispose those packages. All that waste that is not digestible, you have to pay for the disposal. But besides that, that sometimes I believe can generate they need to pay property taxes. Okay, so those are the costs. Now, what are the revenues? So the revenues in an organization plan are varied, and having a diverse portfolio of potential revenues will be very good for these plans. So the main one, of course, or the first one will be the biogas sales. We mentioned it already. It's all about the renewable energy, selling it as electricity, or to the grid, or injecting the renewable gas to the grid, or say the compressed natural gas for transportation. Besides that, we have all these other ones that are coming here that I was planning to describe shortly, but since I see the time, I'm not going to spend time, since the next speaker or two speakers after me is going to talk more about these. But there's tax credits, the renewable fuel standard, carbon offset credits. So there's different sources, and this keeps changing significantly. The Inflation Reduction Act has extended some of this. I hope we hear some more about this later. Then any other organic product that you sell, so anything that comes from the digestate, so nutrient enhancement products, any fertilizers, or any organic products, fiber products that could be made from the digestate. For example, as I said, the digestate could be converted into fiber products. I also seen it make it into pellets and actually used for fuel. So there's many things that could be done for the digestate, and because. So I think I was a little negative about the digestate, and the point I want to make is the digestate could go from that source of actual cost into a revenue if it's well planned. So if a plan really finds markets and create products that are needed by the markets with the digestate, it can increase significantly its revenue, and the digestate can become a source of revenue instead of a source of cost. So the digesters that are digestion plants can operate in very different models. I think the most typical one that we expect is a farm owned and operated anaerobic digestion, but there's actually many other ways of operating. It could be operated by a third party and owned by a third party, but it could be operated by a third party but actually owned by the farmer. This model could be very successful because of times the operation is what had made some of these digesters fail in the past. And then there's the hub and spoke model, and this one could come in many ways, but usually requires some of centralization. So it could be a centralized anaerobic digester that takes waste from several farms, and it maybe brings organic waste from other sources. This is very common in Europe, not so common here. Sometimes this is run as cooperatives, but sometimes what is centralized is the actual biogas production. So, not the biogas processing. So like, for example, a renewable natural gas facility. So different digesters, but they all send it to a centralized place where the biogas is cleaned up and compressed. Okay, so finally, to be able to do that, to determine these economics, we need feasibility studies. So they usually start with a pre-feasibility study that requires to know several things about the farm. I have a list here, and I'll share these slides with you, but I'm not going to go through all these lists. But these are very simple things of characteristics of the farm. And then finally, a feasibility study that is key, where the feedstock is actually analyzed and BMP tests, biomethane potential tests, are actually performed. This is sometimes skipped, and that's not very good for these projects that are so expensive. Then define what products are going to be recovered, what technologies are going to be used for the energy production, complete mass and energy balances to then be able to do capital and operating cost estimates, revenue estimates, and finally, economic and financial projections. And here I just had some examples of those mass energy balances that I believe are key to be able to do this analysis. I think I lost here my slide, sorry. And then finally, I wanted to share some other sources. Most of this information comes from the AgStar Project Development Handbook, and I believe is a great source if you want to know more about this. And this, here's some from an article we wrote if you want to know more about global economics of anaerobic digestion. And me and my colleagues wrote this article a couple of years ago that I wanted to share as well. And that's it. I'll take any questions.